Hello, this is Cotton Stoops, and today's video is a heavily requested video topic of mine I finally decided to publish. And of course, this video is a comprehensive guide on Loomian Legacy team building. There are a lot of factors to try and cover, whether that be Loomian synergy, matchups, and more. It can be very hard for new or returning players to make a solid PvP team. So this video will cover a wide array of topics that to help players team build, such as playstyles, team requirements for the meta, example teams, and example cores that'll go along with this meta. So let's just get this short introduction out of the way. This is how to team build in Loomian Legacy May 2024. First off, the best meta playstyles at this moment are balance and semi-stall. So the video will focus around these playstyles. I've made a comprehensive guides to both of these playstyles which will be linked in the description. However, just for the sake of this video, I'll be providing team examples for both. First off, let's talk about the requirements for each team in general based on this metagame. Unfortunately, there are quite a lot of requirements due to this metagame being quite oppressive. However, these requirements can blend in with each other, which can be used with a certain few Loomians. The first requirement are immunities to light, spirit, and electric. These types have pivot moves to their names, such as fade away for spirit, flash and flee for light, and electric has zip zap. Of course, for anyone who's played this game, momentum is a very scary thing in this metagame, as pivot moves can help predict what you're going to do, and of course, this will help you bring in your strong wall breakers through the use of slow pivots, such as Soulburst Reptidon being one of the best wall breakers in the game that pairs up with pivots. So stopping the opponent's momentum with Loomians that can just absorb these pivot moves and stopping them from pivoting is very important. So running plant, earth, or light types on your team to stop these pivot moves is very important. If you do not have these types on your team, then pivots will just destroy your team completely, no matter how well built your team may seem to be. Next up, we have brawler immunities. This go for the fact for light, electric, and spirit immunities. However, it's not related to pivots, it's more so related to driving force. Right now, there are very strong driving force users in this metagame, namely Gargoyle Defense. And because it has driving force, it has the ability to just force Loomians out of the battle, and then of course stacking damage onto them with hazards. This makes your Golem defense really hard to stop, so running immunities to Brawler so it doesn't have the ability to driving force you out is very important. However, to stop these driving forces, you have to run spirit types. So using Loomians such as Harvesect, Vesperatu, Nevermare, and Soulburst Krakaloa, they are very good options to stop driving force. However, do note, because most spirits are just stumped on by Gargoyle Defense because Gargoyle Defense is so bulky, the only spirits that I've mentioned has the ability to stop it. And then of course, this does go for other Loomians such as Rogue Assault Wrestling, which is admittedly not going to be a problem because Jamie wants to remove Rogue Assault from Wrestling. However, this is still something to watch out for. Next up, we have bulky water and light types. This is mainly for stuff like Soulburst Eruptodon and Landtorch. Soulburst Eruptodon for the bulky waters, Landtorch getting stopped by lights. These two are very oppressive fire type Loomians that will just pretty much sweep through any team if you do not have a bulky water and light type. Next up, you need fire types for Icicle Traps. If your team is running a very good defensive Loomian such as Gargoyle Defense, Soulburst Gasstroke, or just even offensive Loomians such as Nevermare, they're going to be weak to Icicle Traps, and taking 1/4 of your HP away when swapping into the battle is very bad. You need hazard removal, which is very oppressive, like I've said with Gargoyle Defense, as taking damage onto your Loomians every time you get into the battle is very bad. So running Gust, Mudslide, or Burn Up is something I would suggest heavily, as these moves help get rid of hazards off of your team. What I would even more suggest is running bulkier hazard removers such as Cleone or Gargoyle Defense, as they don't really care about the hazard damage, and then they can just get rid of them because they're bulky. Next up, you need a metal type. A metal type is mainly for the likes of Glaciadia. Even when Chilling Passion gets nerfed, it's still going to be a very large threat, so having a metal type for that is something I recommend. However, due to how hard Glaciadia hits, there's only a few metal types such as Serenite and Valkyrie that can actually stop Glaciadia. Next up, we have not required but helpful additions to your hazard teams, or just teams in general. You need hazards, pivot, soul bursts, or poison types. Hazards is very good as you're going to be finding yourself to doing a lot of swapping, so having some damage while you're not hitting anything is just very good. Pivots also is a very good tool to utilize, predicting what the opponent can do next and having a safe option that can just bring in your wall breaker of choice or something that threatened out their Loomians is very good with pivots. Soul bursts are particularly good, not just because they're just very good Loomians, with the exception of Soul Burst Florant. However, soul bursts are very good so you can stop your team from getting bartered from the likes of Snagoop or Trader Weasling. And then poison types. Poison barbs aren't really as common in this metagame because we don't really have solid enough poison barb setters. However, if you are worried about statuses like poison from something like Vanillin or Swolder, then running these poison types will for sure help your chances against them. So like I said, I'm going to be giving a few examples of teams that fulfill these requirements. These are not just meant for teams that you can just use on your own, although you can. This is just mainly how to show you how people like building their teams. So first off, this is going to be a team based off of Soul Burst or Retrodon right here. Soul Burst or Retrodon is a very large threat. You can run very smart or smart nimble. It really depends on what you want. However, for Loomians that are just around this 70 to 80 base speed tier range, there's not a lot of stuff that you can really outspeed with nimble, but you can really choose what you want. And of course, we fulfill our fire type slots with actually 2 Loomians for being Soul Burst Retrodon and Serenite. And of course, Serenite overlaps with the metal type requirement for our teams, so that's pretty solid for us. And then of course, we move on to the other Loomians. We have your plant type for the specific flash and flee users. We got your electric type, or mainly your light type for fade away stuff. And then you also have lightning rod here, which can help with zip zap. If I wasn't running Eleguana and per se I was running an earth type for a zip zap and not Eleguana, you can have the air type or the earth type being Soul Burst or Optodon, but you can also replace this for Gargoyle Defense. So you're not really reliant on ability to actually stop zip zap, but this is particularly fine. Then you notice you have our bulky light type with Eleguana. You also have your bulky water type with Cleone. Both of these guys do really well against the likes of Soul Burst of the Dawn and Lantorch, so that goes for you very well. And then of course you have your other stuff. I do have a brawler immunity to wrestle in, so your snack is very good here. However, your snack cannot do much against Gargoyle Defense, so that is a thing that is existing for this team. However, what your snack can do is that it can pivot out into Tatab or Soul Burst or Dawn. It really depends what you really want to do. And then Dragoon in here, it's really useful. It's just a glue tech that can just stop everything else. It also is holding the Mysterious Dust, and it does do very well against other poison types because it does have its air type, and it overall just does very well against those stuff, so that is also very cool. Also, notice that I do not have hazard setting. However, if I just quickly change this and put barbs on Serenite, there you go. That is another option. I have my Soul Burst right here so it can stop barters. I got my pivot from your snack, Cleone, and Eleguana, so that is something that you want to consider also. This is just a team that a friend that recommended me, and of course I found this team really solid, so I just decided to showcase it. Let me give you guys another example of a team that has Loomians that can just fulfill multiple roles. Next up, we have a team that is centered around Halvantic. And Halvantic is, of course, one of the best melee wall breakers in the game. And this core is kind of an old core. And I'll explain when I show you guys, but this is still a very good core. Halvantic and Charonix has been a very old core because Charonix does really well against Halvantic's swap-ins such as Tundrelin, Yursnak, Obsidian, and Gargolem defense. Charonix, just an offensive variant one. You can have like replace Nova Blast for Spite if you really want to, but this is a really good Charonix. And as for Halvantic, it helps out Charonix's answers because most of Charonix's answers are metal types. So this is a very strong offensive core. I did forget to mention a core from my last team, but however, it is pretty plain to see. It's just a Soul Burst Reptodon core. But anyways, next up we have Serenite. This covers our fire and metal type slot, which also just very well does. Of course, our spirit type here, not Halvantic, Charonix, makes it so we are more resistant to Driving Force and Wrestling. Charonix being one of the best answers for Gargolem defense because Gargolem defense really cannot touch Charonix. Unless you're more defensive, then it really cannot even do anything to you. So that's good here. You also got another spirit type here in Nevermare. This is mainly for offensively checking some other stuff like Tatab if you really want to, which this team does struggle with a kind of bit, but Halvantic can answer it offensively. Speaking of which, Charonix also acts as your light type, so you can also make this your fade away swap in. What's also even better is that if you do not want to run Reaper and run Radiance, if I recall it, or Prismatic actually, this makes it so that Charonix is also immune to Flash and Flee. So you basically resist, or you're immune to all of the attacking pivot moves besides Zip Zap, which Gargolem defense does cover. It also acts as your Driving Force Loomian with barbs up, and of course it removes hazards itself, so that's very good. You also have Dragoon here, which again carries over from the last team. I didn't expand on this guy too much, but this guy really just does well against Yursnak, which this team doesn't really struggle against, but of course Yursnak is tank. It can swap in on a lot of stuff. And then Cleone here is meant for your bulky water type. I am not missing anything from this list if I do recall. The only thing that you can really argue for is the Soul Burst option. But honestly, the Soul Burst option here is really not that bad. You can just swap in this to Weaselin and then you can just Driving Force it out. Weaselin doesn't really do much to this if you really want to. Charonix also doesn't mind it because it is quite slow. 51 base speed, doesn't mind the heavy shackles. This is just very solid team even without a Soul Burst. So let me showcase one more team. Next up, I do have one more team to showcase, and this is mainly a very bulky, a stall breaker type team. And this team is mainly going to revolve around Odayaga, a very good Loomian that simply just has a lot of strengths. With its diverse coverage you can really run. You can run Frost Beam, Thunder Strike, Fire Breath, Dark Surge, what you really want. But this will mainly focus around beating Semi-Stall and Stall because of Odayaga having Provoke, Psycho Blast, being able to set up on a lot of range attackers. And of course, this makes it a lot more easier with the rest of the team, as this team with Radiant Forecast Valkyrie and Tatab, they all play a good role here. And then of course, to make up for the fact that Odayaga is going to be the main part of our team, we have support in Luminami from pivoting them in. You got Dragoon, which is mainly here for the slapdown support, and Baffle, just blocking those two. You have Gargolem defense, which does really well against a lot of Loomians, specifically with its hazard setting. And then of course you got Soul Burst Krakaloa. This can't be another Soul Burst, but I found that you really using and in tapping into your defensive potential with Soul Burst Krakaloa is just very important, as this will help solve a lot of issues against the likes of Hunder, Tatab when you have stuff like Raging Flame. Of course you do not need that, you perfectly wall them either way, but Raging Flame is a very strong attribute that can help out the rest of the team. Anyways, what I really want to tap into is that it does fill all the requirements. You have your plant type, your light type, And then of course you have your earth type, so you can pretty much all just stop any kind of pivot. Dragiden stops the baffle pivot. It also, Odiaga, prevents provoke, so stuff like dissipate cannot get past you. You have your bulky light types here with Luminami or Valkyrie. Luminami, fun fact, it does wall both Land Torch and Soul Burst Weapon. You have to play around Soul Burst Weapon a little bit more because it does do a lot more damage. However, you have your defensive attributes. You can just hit it super effectively or pivot out into Odiaga or Valkyrie or Tatab. Really anything you really want to. Dragiden here pretty much patches up the rest of the team like it has always been doing. This is your hazard setter, your hazard remover. You can also choose to have someone else as your hazard remover, like Krakaloa with Burn Up. Although, if you do not want to run Burn Up, you can replace this for Burning Rage or whatever it's called, Raging Flame, and then you can run whatever. Mud Spatter is mainly here for the likes of Seer Knight, so we can just stop this faster. However, running Dark Surge is also perfectly understandable. And then yeah, this is pretty much a well-built team. You have your metal for Glashadias. Not really else I'm missing here. So yeah, and then of course you have your brawler immunities from Krakaloa. You also have resists across the board from Gargoyle Defense, Dragiden, and Odiaga. However, something that you really want to watch out for is Ice Cold Traps. You have Krakaloa and you resist it with Valkyrie, Luminami, and Tatab is neutral of course. However, Ice Cold Traps is something to watch out. So now that you guys have a general idea of how teams are built, usually teams are built with offensive plants and then offensive fires. Of course, defensive fires can be used. Anything else I'm really missing is that most of these bulky water or lights are coming from Luminami or Cleone. Jalusa also works very well. Your hazard removal mostly comes from Cleone or Gargoyle Defense, or anything really like Soul Burst Krakaloa. Your hazards can really come from anything from Gargoyle Defense to Seer Knight, it really depends. And brawler immunities, they're mostly comprised of the same spirit types over and over. Pivots, they're mostly comprised of Flash and Flee users, and then Bafflers. That's the main type of pivot in this game. And then yeah, so let's get right onto the final section. So that's pretty much it for today's video. I do want to talk about a little bit more things concerning stuff in Loomian Legacy in general, but right now I think you guys see a very clear theme with the fact of Loomian Legacy at this moment, but right now it's just really oppressive. This metagame is probably one of the worst metagames like to date, because you have to run so much specific things. Like, people can even see in the requirements and the teams, I'm repeating a lot of the same Loomians over and over just because of how oppressive this metagame really is. And it kind of just sucks that the fact that most of the teams that you will be seeing are like direct inspirations or copies of each other. However, you can still be creative with your teams, you can still make use of the requirements, and because I've laid down the foundations in this video, you can also make your own teams using the requirements I've laid out. So hopefully you guys got a better understanding of PvP, and then of course team building in general. Of course, a team is fundamentally great, however what makes the team perform even better is your own skill, nothing else. So yeah, this is Cotton Stoops signing off to remind you that Zulong is still a dumpster fire.